And we are currently live on YouTube.
And everybody.
Is my noise in the kitchen distracting you at all?
All right, Jim, I got 9 o'clock. If you want to go ahead and get her started.
Okay, I'll call the meeting to order. We begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the
United States of America,
to
to the republic,
which stands one nation,
one nation,
the
under God, indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
Want to make one announcement regarding voting. There will be a roll call vote with any motion that deals with variances, a roll call vote, and the chair will vote last. Other than that, we have the agenda. Let's have a roll call by the secretary.
Jim, can I make one quick announcement that this meeting is being held fully electronically at this time while the county is still under their state of emergency in compliance with the Open Meetings Act. I just need to make that announcement for the meeting.
Thank you.
Yep.
Mr.
Roll
Wines,
call.
Mr. Wines,
Present, Mineral Springs, Deerfield Township.
Mr. Vogel,
Present, Rosebush, Michigan.
Mr. Duffett,
Present, Clare, Michigan.
Mr. Riley,
Present, Shepherd.
Mr. Cromer,
Present, Deerfield Township.
all present.
Thank you. You have a copy of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
Tom Riley, so.
Philip Vogel,
We got that? We have had a motion and a second. All in
Yes.
favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none, motion passed. The minutes from the February 17, 2021 meeting. Are there any additions or corrections?
I move that the minutes be accepted as presented.
Motion by Cromer. Support?
Second by Tom Riley.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none, motion passed 5-0. At this point, we're opening the meeting to public comment on non-agenda items. Has nothing to do with this variance request.
As a reminder, anyone on the Zoom call can press *9 on their phone if they wanted to comment. And just a reminder, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, there will be a public comment period during the variance public hearing.
Right.
At this point in time, Mr. Chairman, I do not have any hands that are raised.
Okay, thank you. So that closes the public comment regarding the non-agenda items. Next on the agenda is variance request 21-02. I'll turn the meeting over to Ray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, this is variance request 21-02. It's located in Nottawa Township. The property owners are Wayne and Sandra Corian. It's section 30, again, of Nottawa Township. Address is 5469 West Lakeshore Drive. The applicant has submitted an application to request a variance to allow for a side yard setback of 6 inches where 5 feet is required. I'll give you a little more detail about that request here in just a moment. The property is on Coldwater Lake, there on West Lakeshore Drive. It's down towards the southern end of the lake, southwest corner of the lake. It's a back lot to the lake itself, but it does front upon the river that comes out of Coldwater Lake. It is in the Lakes Area Residential Zoning District. The application was received back in May of 2021. It includes a deed to the property, site plans, a narrative, as well as several supplemental documents and pictures submitted by the applicant. Mr. and Mrs. Corian are proposing to install a whole house generator 6 inches from the side property line. A little bit of background on this. Back in April of this year, we received a complaint from a resident that a structure had been installed that was too close to the property line in accordance with the county zoning ordinance. I quoted a section of the zoning ordinance there for you in your staff report. It's section 1502. Basically, it says that if there is a building or a structure 200 square feet or less, two things. One, it doesn't require a zoning permit. And two, it is required to be minimum of 5 feet from a side property line. So although a zoning permit is not required, there are still regulations surrounding it. And unbeknownst to Mr. and Mrs. Corian, there's a 5-foot side yard setback. Mr. and Mrs. Corian, after several discussions from the violation, decided to submit this variance application in their attempt to resolve the zoning violation. According to the application and the narrative, they'd like the generator to be installed and remain in the proposed location because of a disability and a need to utilize the golf cart to access the river by Mrs. Corian. Again, also according to the application, if the structure were placed closer to the home in accordance with the zoning regulation of 5 feet, there would not be sufficient room to utilize the golf court on that side of the home. There's mention in the application of a requirement to be 18 inches from the home, a minimum. I spoke to the mechanical inspector here in our office, and he let me know that in accordance with his code requirements, the generator shall be installed as per the manufacturer's installation instructions. And so the mechanical inspector, gave me a copy of the Generac sizing guide, which includes the installation instructions. And I can confirm it does need to be minimum 18 inches from the home, as well as 5 feet. The closest point in the generator has to be 5 feet from an open window. This is for two reasons. One, to allow airflow for the generator, and to allow exhaust fumes in the event that the generator is running to sufficiently dissipate in a safe manner. I would note that the generator in its current location does meet those installation requirements. When I originally got the enforcement open, I just doing some research on the property, as we always do for our enforcements. I noticed that with the generator being installed, there was not a required mechanical and electrical permit that had been pulled for that installation. When I notified Mr. Corian and Mrs. Corian about that, they did go ahead and get those permits that were required by state law. It's important to note that in the application narrative, there's some uncertainty about the property line. In the narrative that was submitted with the application, Mr. and Mrs. Corian state that the property line was the retaining wall, and they felt that the neighbors indicated that the property line was the black fence that's installed on the property. Normally this raises a red flag for staff, and so we discussed this with Mr. and Mrs. Corian. After several emails and the most recent email, Mr. Corian indicated that they agreed that the property line is the black fence. So it removes the uncertainty around this property line. According to Mr. Corian, both neighbors are now agreeing that the fence is the property line. So that removes that uncertainty about the property line, but it does propose a little bit of an issue in the supplemental variance that was submitted by Mr. Corian, Mr. and Mrs. Corian, which I've got on the screen now. You can see the generator and its location here, 6 inches from what is agreed upon as the property line. That leaves the gas line that feeds the generator over on the neighbor's property, which again is a red flag. I spoke to Mr. Corian about this, and he indicated that if approved for the variance request, he would expeditiously move the gas line. He didn't indicate which side, but he would move it to the side of the generator so that it's no longer on the neighbor's property. Lastly, in the narrative as well, Mr. and Mrs. Corian make mention about a fence that they wish to install and a variance which would allow them to install the fence. I'd like to let the board know that the fence is not subject to the variance request. The county, we don't require under the zoning ordinance permits, a zoning permit for a fence to be installed, nor are there setbacks for a fence. Fences are something that's not subject to setbacks, so it can be placed on or just inside the property line as the property owner wishes. In your staff report, we have given you the zoning ordinance language that we always do, section 1404C 1 through 5. I think it's important to remind the board that they should be asking themselves and having discussion at the appropriate time about 1404C 1 through 5 and whether or not the applicant has demonstrated evidence of the practical difficulty and that all of the conditions in 1 through 5 have been met. In summary, after review of the application, it does appear to be complete, and staff has posted a sign on the property as well as posted the request in the Morning Sun as per state law and ordinance requirements. We've sent out mailings to all property owners within 300 feet of the property. At the date of the memorandum that we sent to you, staff had not received any correspondences for or against the variance request. After we sent your digital packets to you, we did receive a letter. This is a letter from Laura and Gary Shepard, property owners of 5463 West Lakeshore Drive, and I believe that is the neighbor closest to the generator. This letter is in general opposition to the variance request, and I would note we did send you a copy of this letter prior to the meeting, just after we received it. They make mention in their letter again about the privacy fence. That's a non-issue that I've explained already. They do mention in about the 4th paragraph, they are strongly opposed to the placement of the generator at the property line. And then they give their reasoning of why they feel that Mr. and Mrs. Corian have not demonstrated compliance with section 1404C 1 through 5 of the ordinance. In addition to that, just this morning, and I sent this to the board about an hour ago, so you may or may not have received this via email. I got a letter from Mr. Corian, who's it appears is on the call today, and it says in the email that he wanted to get this to me before the meeting tomorrow. He sent it actually at 8:30 last night, but I just received it this morning, in hopes that you could get it to all who are involved. These are points I think need to be considered in making the decision. I'll be glad to present them. There is an attachment to that. And so I'll allow Mr. Corian, as he's indicated, to review those during the public hearing portion of the meeting. That's all I have. The staff report does give you your sample motions, as we always do. But that's really, at this point in time, all I have, unless the board has questions for me.
Yeah, I have one, Ray.
Yes.
The neighbor and the applicant have agreed that the fence is the property line, but a survey could show that the line is someplace else.
That's correct. A survey could establish the property line in some other area. That's correct, and that's of course, always the case in any request. If they haven't submitted a survey, the initial application, we never require a survey when somebody is applying for either a zoning permit or a variance request. But yes, that could indicate that the property line is in a different location.
Thank you.
Chairman Wines, I have one addition just to add quickly. So just as a reminder to the board, you know, variances are things that that applicants typically seek, and they're not typically in place at this time. Your review of this is not with regard to the fact that it's currently in place. You know, you're looking at this and discussing and making your decisions based on the fact that you know, this is a request from him to place it there. So, you know, with regard to that gas line, which is a concern on the neighbor's property and that he's expeditiously agreed to move if granted, you know, that's not, you know, necessarily an issue at this time, because we're looking at it as if the unit is not there. If you were to move forward and grant this variance for him to be at the 6 inches, he would be required, because he would be in violation of the granting of the request at 6 inches. He would be in violation of that, having that gas line on the neighbor's property there. So just a reminder, you know, look at this application as if the unit is not in place currently.
Okay, thank you, Jim.
Yep.
Ray, are you still there?
Yes, I am, sir.
Have you, any more you want to add?
I have nothing else to add, sir. I have nothing else unless there are other questions for us.
Any questions from the board members?
I'm looking at the attachment E in the presentation, and it seems to me that there's about a 20-foot space between the garage and the house. Is that correct?
I would estimate that that's approximately, I did not measure the actual distance between the house and the garage, but I would say that's a safe assumption. Mr. Corian may be able to speak to that a little bit later, though.
What I was wondering is that generator could have been placed, you know, between the garage and the house to meet all the requirements. And then that would even clear more space for the golf cart passage, or it could be, I think, placed on the lakeside side of the house as well, as long as it's that close to the house. I'm not sure what the requirements are for lakeside building. And I'm just wondering why that was not a consideration initially.
If I had to go out on a limb and guess, it's simply because the cost associated with materials to hook it up to the house. Most of the time, those generators are put right close to the electrical meter because they got to plug into everything right there. So that was the shortest distance between 2 points. Again, that's only a guess, but I do happen to agree with you. If you get, I was thinking maybe the lake side of the shed, where that shed is. If you get on the lakeside wall there, there is enough room. It's about 40 foot from where the generator is currently placed, move back towards that shed. I think that would allow the golf cart the room and alleviate any reason for a variance whatsoever. It does involve moving the generator, but again, we have to look at this like the generator's not there.
Mr. Chairman, unless there are specific questions for staff, I think maybe we should let the applicant go ahead and speak, and then get a motion on the table so that we can have further discussion. Because it sounds like we're kind of working into discussion a little bit here.
Sure. Okay, let's do it at this point. We'll have a public hearing portion with the applicant, given an opportunity to address the board. Is the applicant available?
Yes, Mr. Corian will need to unmute himself.
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yep.
Was there a question? I'm sorry.
This is
No.
just, Mr. Corey, and this is the time of the meeting and the hearing in which you're to present your case and your application to the board.
Okay. If you don't have the attachment that Ray was speaking of, I can walk through it. It's lengthy. But it was our 6 points of why we thought we should be considered to get a grant to have this variance. Do you want me to walk down through each of the items?
Yeah, I would recommend that, Mr. Corey, that you do walk through it, just because it was not part of your application, and staff and the board has just received it this morning.
Okay, these are 6 points that we think would be help determine or should be considered to be determined the outcome. Number one, exceptional and extraordinary circumstances or conditions applying to the property that do not generally apply to properties in the same zoning district. And that has 2 subtitles underneath it. All of the lots in the subdivision are essentially exceptional and extraordinary as they were designed at a time that could not have foreseen modern conveniences such as standalone generators. The second one, the lots are tight, and over time, more lots are going to seek modernization to increase the likelihood of that these houses can continue to support the residents. Second point, that the variance is necessary for the preservation and enjoyment of the substantial property similar to that possessed by other properties in the same zoning district or in the vicinity. The possibility of the compliance with ordinance may approve to be expensive, otherwise inconvenient, shall not be part of the consideration of the zoning board. And there's 3 subpoints under that one. As shown in our application, continued modernization has taken place over time in the immediate area, some permitted and some probably not. The point is that we can't access our most enjoyable feature of the lot. And because of the layout, we are the original owners. We're the original owners built the house, and the best place for the generator to be located to access the interior electric and inside the house, similar to what Brent had mentioned earlier. This isn't a structure like a shed that would prevent emergency services access to the rear of the property or the riverside of the property, or to block visibility of others to be back between the lots. It's really no greater size than other small structures, such as utility boxes or electrical transformers. The placement cannot be, the third item, the placement cannot be considered otherwise inconvenient given the circumstances. The only way we can modernize like others and be able to access the waterfront like every other lakefront owner that has the ability to do so, as to place the generator in this location that we suggested. Number 3 point, the variance will not be detrimental or detrimental to adjacent properties in the surrounding area. That includes adding improvements, upgrading, and providing reasonable access to our lakefront that is not a detrimental to the adjacent property or neighborhood. Other improvements such as retaining walls, trees, sheds, utility boxes are similarly situated and have not caused degradation to the neighborhood. Point number 4, the variance will not materially impair the intent or the purpose of the ordinance. The subnote is in the intent of the ordinance is to protect public health, safety, and welfare of the community. The intent of setbacks are the same. Second point of number 4 or subpoint is that the generator is in no way impacts the public health, safety, or welfare of the community where it's proposed to be located. Its low profile provides adequate access for emergency personnel to the back lot or to the back area of the cabin. It does not prevent personnel use and enjoyment of or does not prevent the personal use or enjoyment of our neighbors on their property. that the immediate, number 5, excuse me. Number 5, the immediate practical difficulty causing the need for the variance request was not created by the applicant. We did not create the lot size or choose the location of the house, the location of the generators to take advantage of where the interior layout of the electric is in the house. Something, again, we did not choose. We are simply modernizing our house. Second subpoint, we are simply modernizing our house with the safety feature and locating feature that provides us our future owners the emergency personal convenient access to the lake from our house. The 6th and last point that we wanted to bring before the board was it's part of the ADA compliance. Part 2 of the ADA prohibits discrimination against disabled persons or denial of the benefits, services, or programs of a local government on the basis of disability. In essence, the requirements of the FFHA are the same as ADA requirements. According to the regulations implemented in the ADA, 2 that we'd like to point out, a public entity shall not make reasonable modifications in policies, practices, or procedures when the modifications are necessary to avoid discrimination of the basis of disability, unless the public entity can demonstrate that making the modifications would fundamentally alter the nature of the service, program, or activity. The policies, second note, these policy procedures and practices included in the local zoning ordinances according to Title II Technical Assistance Manual published by the Department of Justice includes the following. These are 2 illustrations that we're citing here. Illustration 1, municipal zoning ordinance requires a setback of 12 feet from the curb in a central business district in order to install a ramp in front of the entrance of a pharmacy. The owner must encroach on the setback 3 feet. Granting a variance in the zoning requirement may be a reasonable modification of town policy. An example of the court cases in which municipalities were found to have violated ADA by not waiving general ordinance requirements in situation which is disabled homeowner sought to build a paved parking space in front of the home. So there was just 2 cases that we cited. So that was basically the attachment that I sent to Ray last night. And I apologize for getting it out late, but I just got it in my hands yesterday. I think our neighbors are on the phone. I just want to introduce myself because we had not ever met yet. My wife can't join us today. She is in the hospital. She had emergency surgery. A couple of can I continue or should I stop? I mean, I want to comment on some of the comments that the board has made. Is it okay to say a few more things?
Yeah, make it kind of brief, but go ahead.
The black fence that was talked about, that I think the neighbors and us agree with, that we agree that that's a property line. It's a small 12 to 18 inch fence, and it kind of wavers back and forth. In regards to where the actual property line is, I just want to make that known that it's not straight line like a fence would be, but just want you to be aware of that. As far as the survey goes, I think that would be a wasted expense in the fact that we did find the property stakes and we know now where the lot lines are. I want our neighbors to know, if they're listening in, that we did not do anything to be malicious here. It was strictly to be able to have access to the riverside. My wife is an amputee, and our property has about a 20-degree angle on the front and the back side of it. And so it makes it very difficult for her to walk up and down that with crutches. So that's why we needed the golf cart access. Someone had mentioned, I think it was Tom, about different locations. I just want to mention that even though there is approximately 20 foot between the garage and this black fence or property line that we talk about, I want people to understand that it's an expense, number one, and more importantly, our septic line goes right out through that area to our septic tank. And as you all know from Isabella County, that shortly the sewer lines are going to be coming out of Beale City and going around Coldwater Lake, which means I wouldn't have to remove it when they rehook up to that line, and then I would have to move it again. So that's another driver for why we placed it where we were at. That's all my comments.
Okay, thank you. Now, Ray, is there any other public comment from others?
Ray, you're muted.
Oh, okay. Do we have anyone wanting to address this issue from as
Yes,
a public?
we do have a public on the line, and they do have a hand raised. I'm going to ask them to unmute themselves at this point in time. Caller with the last 3 digits of 734 in your phone number, you can unmute yourself by pressing *6 on your phone. And then
Hello,
if you go ahead with your public comment.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. So this is Laura and Gary Shepard calling in. So we just wanted to add a couple of comments. So we have enjoyed and owned that property for the past 17 years. And we, as noted in the letter that we sent, we don't agree with the current generator placement. We noted a couple of the different reasons in the letter, and in response to Wayne's comment on his reasonings for the section 14C. Actually, we were up there when there was the most recent power outage that lasted there for a little more than an hour. And during that time, we could hear the generator throughout the whole house, not just in my kid's bedroom, which is located right next to the generator, but also all the way on the other side. So it was very loud, and it was a disturbance to us being in the place that it is located right now. Secondly, I don't think that he acted maliciously at all. I really don't. I think it was more so the permits weren't pulled. He was eager to get it in and to do it at a low cost, but that's, not the purpose of this variance. The purpose is we treat this as if it does not exist. And you guys pointed out a couple of locations, and we agree where it could have easily been placed for other reasons. Other than that, those are the main things, just to let you know that we were here to tell you about the fact that we actually did find that it was a disturbance to our property. And yeah, if there's any other questions or anything, just let us know. Also, sorry, on the fence, in the placement, even though we said that's not part of the variance, we just wanted to note on the record that we did not want that placed directly on the property line of the black fence. I don't know if we note that here. More so, we want it on their property if they want to place a privacy fence, so then we don't have any disputes in the future as far as who owns it or repairs or any of that. If the privacy fence is on their property, then that negates that whole entire future potential discussion. So, thank you.
Could the caller please state their address for the record?
Yep, 5463 West Lakeshore Drive, Weedman, Michigan.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, Ray, is there anyone else?
Mr. Chairman, there's no other callers on the meeting at this point.
Okay, then we'll close the meeting to public comment. And this means that when we deliberate and so forth as a board, that non-board members can't join in if they see fit. The public comment is over. Okay, meeting is closed to public comment. Now we're back to our discussion with the Zoning Board of Appeals in terms of this variance. Oh, anyone have anything you want to ask of anybody or Any comments people want to make? I know we've had a couple earlier.
Philip Vogel, how far is it from, I see in the picture that it is located close to that home of the neighbors, Shepherds. Does anybody have a number of feet that it is from the home?
I was out yesterday and looked at it. It looked to me about 10 feet, but that's just a guesstimate.
Ray, would you say that's pretty accurate? You've been out there a few times.
Yeah, in the location of where it's at, I would say it's probably anywhere from 10 to 15 feet. The neighbor's house does trend to be a little bit closer to the property line as it gets towards the lakeside, but in the location that the generator is at, I'd say that's pretty close without an actual measurement.
Thank you.
I appreciate Shepard's letter in opposition. My opinion on that, hypothetically, if that generator was back closer to that shed, I did measure that. That's about 40 feet. I don't know that that's going to change the noise level at the neighbor's house that much. I mean, it's an unobstructed 40 feet, so it's probably still going to be pretty loud in their house. That's just something on these small lots that's what people are going to have to deal with. The eyesore, okay, well, 40 feet's not going to make it any uglier than where it is now. So I appreciate the neighbor's concern, but I don't know if that's reason on its own to not approve it. But I do think there is room that it could have been placed a little bit farther back and not have any no need for a variance. The only downside of placing it farther away is truly the expense, unless I'm missing something, because you're going to have more wire and more gas pipe. But number 2 of section 1404C, it states right in there, the possibility that compliance with this ordinance may prove to be more expensive or otherwise inconvenient shall not be part of the consideration. So unless the applicant has another reasoning somewhere why it needs to be there, I guess that would be my question or my point on that. It could have been placed in a different location and not require a variance. Without an abnormal amount. I mean, obviously there's not much room on either side. Yes, I think all his reasonings for it, I would happen to agree with allowing his wife to get the golf cart and all like that. But still, all of that can be accomplished without a variance request if that generator was placed 40 feet in a different location.
Anybody else?
That essentially was my feeling as well. He stated my concerns very adequately.
I have a question for Ray. You are on, Ray?
Yes, I am.
The fact that the lot line, we're not really sure where it is. I know we're probably talking about inches. Is this a problem? Making a decision when we don't know exactly where that line is, or it's not enough of an issue?
Well, I think the initial issue of the uncertainty between the property owners has been resolved. They're both agreeing that that black fence is the property line. Mr. Corian did indicate in his justification when he spoke a few minutes ago that he found the stakes for the property line. I don't know if those are the survey stakes or if there's some other stakes. At the end of the day, if the board were to make an approval that the generator be 6 inches from the property line, if a survey later were produced by somebody that showed the generator was different than that, then that could cause a problem for Mr. Corian. The approval would be for the generator to be placed 6 inches from the property line. If the property line is somewhere else, then he still has to comply with that 6 inches that the board would have approved.
Thanks, Ray. Any other discussion regarding this variance request 21-02? Is there a motion available?
I'll make a motion based on 1404C as we go through it. Are there exceptional, extraordinary circumstances? We talk about the narrow lot lines, that kind of stuff. Number 2 is where my sticking point is. There is a viable option and placement for that, I believe. I 100% agree with the owner's request or the reasoning for the variance, but I think everything can be accommodated and done in a different fashion that everybody is happy. So based on that, I would make a motion that we deny the variance.
A motion to deny the variance. Is there a second?
Support.
Support by Mr. Cromer. We have a roll call vote.
Mr. Duffett,
Yes.
Mr. Riley,
Yes.
Mr. Cromer,
Yes.
Mr. Vogel,
Yes.
Mr. Wines.
Yes.
5 yes, motion denied.
Ray, do you want to make any comments? At this
If you don't
point?
mind, Mr. Chairman, could I just clarify the motion was to deny the variance request. All 5 board members voted in favor of that motion, so the variance request is denied.
Right. So the motion carried, but the action was to deny. So the variance request was denied.
Right. Any other, let's see where we go to, any staff comments at this point?
Staff has no additional comments today.
Any board comments? The meeting is adjourned.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.